Hello, and welcome to Steffoodle. I am, eerily, Steph, and it's Halloween, my absolute favorite holiday. Bring me all the pumpkins, ghosts, bats, and cats. When I saw Rachel Maxey's pumpkin lady last year, I thought it was super cute. But when I saw the updated version back in August, I just had to make a doll of her. And what better time than Halloween? So let's get started, shall we? I'll be using this Toy Story 4 Bo Peep as my base, but I'll be swapping the head for the spare Ever After High one I had in my stock box, as it's already big and round, like a pumpkin. I use my hairdryer to heat up the vinyl so I can remove Bo Peep's head, which will go back into my stock box for now. And I go ahead and clip off the bit of the neck peg I don't need. By the way, not sponsored, but I like to listen to audiobooks while I work, and this is what I'm currently listening to. It's a lot of fun. I whittle down the neck peg on the Bo Peep body and widen the neck hole on the Ever After High head. I won't be needing her ears or her nose, so off they go! Then I use my hairdryer again to heat up the head and put it on the body. If you're making any mods to the face or head, most times it's best to reattach it to the body before you sculpt to help reduce any chance of damage. You know what? I don't think she needs this chin either. Off it comes. I learned my lesson with Litwick last year, so before I move on to epoxy, I'll be building up the ridges of the pumpkin with silk clay first. Hopefully she won't be as top heavy as Litwick is. The clay wouldn't stick to the vinyl on its own, so I used some multi-purpose glue to keep it in place. I also smoothed out the eye area and added the base of the stem. And that's the underlying structure done. I left it to dry overnight. Once it's cured, I slice off a bit of the stem so that I can attach a magnet. Another magnet will go into her hat later, so it'll be stable but still removable. And now it's time for Apoxie Sculpt. I mix equal parts A and B and get to work. I begin by covering everything with flattened pieces of epoxy, using water to smooth it as I go. I also use small silicone tools to help keep the pumpkin ridges defined. Then I start working on the stem, with a screenshot from Rachel's video as reference. I use a pin to create texture. I use a dotting tool to carve out and shape the eyes and nose. This is actually my second attempt. The first time I spaced out the eyes all wrong, so I was very careful about measuring where they should go this time. I decided to blend her upper lip into the rest of the clay a bit more, and I think it was the right decision in the end. Sculpting done. and I let her cure overnight once more. Only a couple of areas needed sanding before I moved on to paint. I only used acrylic paint for this whole project. I first coat the entire head with several thin layers of orange. Partway through, I realized that the orange I have is a little pink toned, so I mixed it with some yellow and continued building up the color. It's barely noticeable on camera, but it was really obvious in person. I carefully painted the stem brown. I also used brown to add shading to the pumpkin ridges, blending it out with water. Then I painted the eyes and nose and the line of her smile. I used a mix of red and coral pink for her lips. To highlight the pumpkin ridges, I dry brushed them with yellow. I used a cotton bud to dry brush some blush onto her cheeks with the same red and coral pink mix I used on her lips. And then used some of the orange and yellow mix to soften the edges. Then I used the tip of a bamboo skewer to add yellow and brown freckles. I added a wash with watered down black acrylic paint to the stem to bring out the texture. Unfortunately, most of the footage was blurry, but here's what it looked like after. I added highlights with a yellow Posca paint pen. It was then that I remembered she was supposed to have eyebrows, so I painted them in with brown. I added a highlight underneath with yellow Posca pen and used a brush to blend it out. And the face up, head up in this case, I guess, is done. I applied a couple of thin coats of matte Mod Podge to seal it all in. Despite being matte, it does have a slight sheen when it dries, perfect for the skin of a pumpkin. I painted her hands brown to make it look like she's wearing gloves, and gave them a wash with watered down black acrylic paint to add dimension. Then I sealed them with matte Mod Podge as well. She needs some boots, so I paint these silver Creatable World ones brown, and then add a black wash like I did with her gloves, and again, sealing it all in with matte Mod Podge. Jumping back in time a bit, I constructed her hat out of brown felt. This old jar lid was about the right size for the brim, so I used it as a template. I cut out the middle, and found something else to use as a template for the crown of the hat. I cut out a thin strip of felt for the hat band, and began stitching it all together. It took a couple of tries to get everything lined up right, and I sewed the brim to the wrong side once. But I think it turned out pretty well. Once I was done, I glued a magnet to the inside of the hat. Now to make the stuff that will go on the hat. To create the berries, I cut 6 lengths of wire and staggered them. So there was like 3 on one side and 3 on the other, and they overlapped a little bit in the middle. I used 2 sets of pliers to twist them all together in the center, and then twisted the longer ends, making the wire look like branches. After trimming them down, I glued pearl beads to the end of the wires. I went over the beads and the ends of the wire with Mod Podge a few times to add stability, as the holes in the beads were wider than the wire I used. I painted the branches brown and the berries orange and sealed it with, you guessed it, more matte Mod Podge. To make the flowers, I'll be repurposing this cotton fabric I painted as an experiment when I was working on Ryoko. It was a fail then for being too stiff and crunchy, but it will be perfect for what I have in mind. I think I got the original technique from my froggy stuff for making paper roses, but I modified it a little bit. I take a small square of the fabric and cut it in a spiral. Then I go back and trim the outer edge to be wavy and a bit jagged. I use Posca paint pens to color both sides of the spiral, using orange and a bit of red on the inner edges, and yellow for the outer edges. Starting at the outer tip of the spiral, I begin rolling the fabric using super glue to stick it to itself. I also squish the flower around and manipulate the shape of it as I go. Once I get to the circle at the end, I dab on a final bit of glue and smush the bottom together before setting it aside to dry. I ended up making 3 of them. To make leaves, I used a green Sharpie to draw and color in the shapes on another piece of fabric before cutting them out. I used a yellow Posca pen to add veins on one side. I wasn't sure if the other side was going to be visible or not, so I roughly colored them in just in case. Then, you guessed it, I gave them a coat of Mod Podge to seal in the ink and add a plant-like sheen. Whoops. I forgot to hit record when I started gluing stuff to the hat. I'm so sorry. I'm using hot glue. In addition to the berries, flowers, and leaves, I made a few tiny pumpkins off camera out of leftover epoxy from when I was sculpting the head, and painted them in orange and brown. And here it is all done! I made her clothes off camera as I used a couple of Requiem Art Designs patterns as a base to make modifications from. I'll leave links to the patterns I used down below in the description. I made this skirt out of a faded tote bag that was the perfect color and some brown ribbon. I increased the length of the skirt and reduced the height of the waistband from the original pattern. I made this blouse following the pattern pretty closely. I used a lace insertion from a top in my fabric stash on the front to mimic the design of Rachel's blouse, and added a faux button placket and pearl beads for buttons. It looks like Rachel's wearing some thermals in the video, so I made some stockings. These will also help the boots fit a bit better since her feet are smaller than a Creatable World doll's feet. I made the jacket out of felt to mimic wool, using the blouse pattern as a very, very rough guide. I cut 2 front pieces instead of 1 on a fold, changed the neckline, added a collar, narrowed the sleeves, and took the back in to tailor it to the doll. I also added a hook and eye closure. And I pieced together this simple shawl out of a charity shop jacket. Then we have the boots, and the hat, and finally the doll herself. Time to get her dressed for the reveal. This project was both simpler and more difficult than I thought it would be. And it was definitely outside of my comfort zone. I kind of wish the skirt was fuller, but I had very limited fabric, so not much I could do about that. Overall, I really love how she turned out. What do you think of this lovely pumpkin lady? And what's your favorite autumnal or Halloween snack? I kind of miss Count Chocula cereal. And I do like autumn mix with candy corn, harvest corn, candy pumpkins, but I can't eat a lot of it because it's so sweet. And I can't get either of them over here in the UK. Unless I want to pay an arm and also perhaps a leg. Speaking of, where do you fall on the great candy corn debate? Do you love it, hate it, Let me know in the comments down below. I'm very interested in your candy corn related opinions. And Rachel, if you're watching this by some happenstance, thank you for the inspiration. I really enjoy watching your videos and have done for quite some time now. So thank you. Hope you're having a lovely fall season. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you'd like to see more from me, and click the bell icon to get notified every time I post a new video. You can also follow me over on Instagram @StephUdoll. I hope you all have a spooktastic Halloween, and until next time, bye!